Close your eyes right now. Not for a second. Keep them closed while you listen to this. Notice something even with your eyelids shut. In a lit room, you can still tell there's light in front of you, a faint reddish glow, a pressure behind your eyes that feels almost like awareness. Now cup your hands over your closed eyes. Block out every photon you can. Feel that shift? That subtle drop? That tiny release in your shoulders? Something in your nervous system just relaxed and you didn't tell it to. You didn't consciously decide to calm down. Your body did it for you, automatically in under 2 seconds. What you just felt was a 500 million-year-old survival switch flipping inside your skull. And here's the unsettling part. That switch isn't in your eyes. It isn't even technically in the part of your brain you use to think, plan, or make decisions. It's older than thought itself. Scientists originally believed darkness was simply the absence of something, the absence of light, the absence of stimulation, a neutral background your brain ignored until morning. That's wrong. Darkness is not empty. Darkness is an instruction. And your brain every single night is built to receive it like a command. Today we're going to take that command apart, piece by piece, starting from a pea-sized structure buried in the center of your head, and by the end you'll understand why this one molecule doesn't just control sleep, it controls how fast you age, how well you remember your own life, and whether your cells survive or self-destruct. This is the physics of melatonin, and it changes how you'll think about nighttime forever. Here's a question almost nobody asks. How does your brain know it's dark? You'd think the answer is obvious, your eyes see less light, so your brain figures it out. But that's not what happens, not even close. There is a direct dedicated neural cable running from your eye to a cluster of neurons in your brain that has nothing to do with seeing images. It doesn't process shapes. It doesn't process color. It doesn't process your mother's face or the words on this screen. It does one single job. It counts photons. And it's not using the rods and cones you learned about in school, the ones responsible for vision. It's using a completely separate class of light-detecting cells discovered only in 2002. For decades, scientists mapped the entire eye and assumed they knew every light-sensing cell it contained. They were wrong. There was a third system hiding in plain sight the entire time. What is this hidden light detector? And why does your brain need a whole separate system just to notice the dark? Inside your retina, alongside the rods and cones that build the image you're seeing right now, sit rare cells called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, iPRGCs. Picture them as light metering sensors, not cameras. They don't care about detail. They don't care about edges or motion or faces. They care about one thing only: the total ambient brightness of your environment, averaged over time. They contain a photopigment called melanopsin, tuned specifically to blue wavelengths, the exact wavelength dominant in daylight, and, not coincidentally, the exact wavelength blasting out of the phone you might be holding right now. These cells fire a signal down a private cable called the retinohypothalamic tract, a name that literally translates to the road from the eye to the command center of the brain. That command center is called the Suprachiasmatic Nucleus, the SCN, a cluster smaller than a grain of rice, sitting directly above where your optic nerves cross. This is not what most people think it is. Most people imagine the brain as one unified processor. But the SCN is something else entirely. It is a clock, a literal, physical, ticking clock made of neurons, and it is the master timekeeper for nearly every cell in your body. Here's where it gets interesting. The SCN doesn't create darkness signals. It creates silence. When photons stop arriving, the iPRGCs stop firing, and that absence of firing is itself the message. Your brain is built to interpret silence as information, a system so elegant that the lack of a signal becomes the signal. The SCN then sends that message backward, deep into the center of your skull, to a structure most people have never heard of and can't locate: the pineal gland. And this is where the real story begins. For most of human history, the pineal gland was considered mystical junk tissue. Descartes, one of the most influential philosophers in history, called it the literal seat of the soul, believing it was where the immaterial mind touched the physical brain. For centuries after that, mainstream anatomy swung the other direction and dismissed it as vestigial, a leftover structure with no real function, like an evolutionary appendix sitting inside your skull. Both were wrong. But here's the strange part. They were wrong in the same direction. They both assumed it was disconnected from ordinary biology, either too spiritual to study or too useless to matter. In reality, the pineal gland is one of the most biologically active tissues in your entire nervous system, and it's doing something almost nowhere else in your body does. It is manufacturing a hormone in real time, based on a live photon count from your eyes, and shipping that hormone into your bloodstream to reprogram nearly every organ you have. The question is, how does a gland the size of a grain of rice, buried in total darkness inside your skull, produce a chemical messenger precise enough to run your biological calendar? To understand melatonin, you have to go back further than the brain, further than animals even. Melatonin isn't a human invention. It's ancient, found in bacteria, algae, plants, and nearly every living organism on Earth. Its original job, billions of years ago, had nothing to do with sleep. Its original job was chemical defense. Melatonin is an extraordinarily efficient antioxidant, one of the few molecules capable of neutralizing free radicals and recruiting other antioxidant systems to help it, a property researchers call the antioxidant cascade. Early single-celled organisms produced it to survive the oxidative stress of solar radiation, which means the molecule your brain uses to make you fall asleep tonight began its existence 3 billion years ago as a molecular sunscreen. Evolution didn't invent a new molecule for the job of timekeeping. It repurposed an ancient survival chemical and gave it a second career. Here's how that repurposing plays out inside you right now, every single night. When your SCN detects darkness, meaning the iPRGCs have gone quiet, it sends a signal down a multi-synapse pathway, through the spinal cord, up through a structure in your neck called the superior cervical ganglion, and finally into the pineal gland itself. That signal switches on an enzyme with one of the most important names in neuroscience, AEANAT aryl alkylamine N-acetyltransferase. This enzyme is sometimes nicknamed the timezyme because its activity level rises and falls exactly with the light-dark cycle. ANAT converts serotonin, yes, the same neurotransmitter linked to mood and happiness, into melatonin through a rapid two-step chemical conversion. Let that sit for a second. Serotonin, your daytime chemical, is the direct raw material for melatonin, your nighttime chemical. They are not separate systems. They are two versions of the same molecule transformed by darkness itself. And the transformation is extreme. Melatonin levels in your blood can rise up to tenfold within a couple of hours of darkness onset, then fall dramatically, as dawn approaches, a chemical wave that sweeps through your entire body on a nightly rhythm your ancestors have followed for hundreds of thousands of years. But melatonin doesn't work the way most people assume it does. It's not a sedative. It's not knocking you out like a chemical hammer. It's something closer to an announcement broadcast to every cell in your body simultaneously. And that raises a much bigger mystery. If nearly every cell can hear this announcement, what exactly are they being told to do? Here's what most people miss completely. Melatonin receptors are not confined to the brain. They exist in your retina, your gut lining, your immune cells, your skin, your ovaries or testes, your cardiovascular system, and even inside your mitochondria, the microscopic power plants inside nearly every cell in your body. Why would a sleep hormone need a landing site inside the very organelles that generate your cellular energy? The answer suggests melatonin was never really a sleep hormone at all. Sleep might just be the most obvious side effect of a system running a far larger operation. The real question is, what is that operation? Inside your mitochondria, oxygen is constantly being converted into usable energy. This process is spectacularly efficient, but it comes with a toxic byproduct: reactive oxygen species, unstable molecules that damage DNA, proteins, and cell membranes if left unchecked. This damage is one of the leading biological theories behind aging itself. Melatonin, because of its ancient antioxidant origins, crosses directly into the mitochondria and neutralizes these damaging molecules on-site, not from a distance, but inside the very structure generating the threat. This is where the story escalates dramatically. Because melatonin release is tied to darkness, your body has essentially scheduled its deepest cellular repair operations for a specific window of night, a maintenance shift that can only run properly when the environment is dark enough to trigger it. Now think about what artificial light does to this system. A single burst of blue spectrum light from a phone, a laptop, an overhead LED can suppress melatonin production for hours, because the melanopsine-based iPRGCs are maximally sensitive to exactly that wavelength. You are not just disrupting your ability to fall asleep. You are functionally canceling a nightly, cell-by-cell maintenance protocol that has run uninterrupted since before animals had bones. And this changes everything about how we should think about a glowing screen at 11 p.m. But the body isn't finished revealing what's at stake. The next mechanism is even more surprising, because it connects melatonin to something deeply personal, your memories. During deep sleep, the sleep stage melatonin helps orchestrate your brain, runs a process researchers call synaptic homeostasis. Throughout the day, your neurons form and strengthen countless connections, some meaningful, most just noise. If this kept accumulating unchecked, your brain would become an overloaded, energy-starved mess. At night, the brain selectively weakens the unimportant connections while preserving and consolidating the important ones, literally sculpting your memory architecture while you're unconscious. Studies on sleep-deprived subjects show measurable impairment in memory consolidation and next-day recall, correlating with disrupted melatonin and sleep cycle timing. Meanwhile, during deep sleep, the brain's glymphatic system, its private waste clearance network, becomes dramatically more active, flushing out metabolic waste products, including amyloid beta, a protein strongly associated with Alzheimer's disease when it accumulates in excess. This means the darkness you experience tonight is directly connected to whether your brain clears out the byproducts linked to one of the most feared neurodegenerative diseases in medicine. Chronic melatonin disruption from shift work, jet lag, or nightly screen exposure has been studied for its association with increased oxidative stress, metabolic disturbance, and altered hormone rhythms tied to long-term health outcomes. Researchers describe circadian disruption as a measurable stressor on the aging process itself, not merely an inconvenience to your sleep schedule. This is no longer a story about feeling groggy in the morning. This is a story about whether your cells repair themselves, whether your brain clears toxic waste, whether your memories consolidate properly, whether your biological age matches your actual age. And it all traces back to a grain of rice-sized gland, responding to a photon count from a light-detecting cell most people don't even know exists. Let's rebuild the entire chain, from the beginning. A photon hits your retina. A rare cell called an iPRGC, not a rod, not a cone, registers that photon using an ancient blue light pigment called melanopsin. That signal travels down a private neural highway to a cluster of neurons smaller than a grain of rice, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the master clock of your entire body. When darkness falls, and that signal goes quiet, the SCN sends an instruction, cascading down through your nervous system, into a gland once dismissed as mystical or useless, triggering an enzyme nicknamed the timezyme to convert your daytime mood molecule into a 3-billion-year-old antioxidant your ancestors' single-celled ancestors used to survive the sun. That molecule then floods your bloodstream, docking onto receptors inside your retina, gut, immune system, skin, reproductive organs, and most critically, inside the mitochondrial power plants of nearly every cell in your body, where it neutralizes the toxic byproducts of your own metabolism. At the same time, it helps orchestrate deep sleep, the stage where your brain physically prunes irrelevant memories, consolidates important ones, and flushes out the same toxic proteins implicated in neurodegenerative disease. Every night, without your permission or awareness, this cascade repeats. A cellular defense system, a memory editing process, and an aging regulation mechanism, all triggered by the simple, ordinary absence of light. Darkness was never empty. It was never passive. It is an evolutionary signal so old it predates the brain, the eye, and even the animal kingdom itself, a message written into the chemistry of life on Earth billions of years before humans existed to notice it. Which means every time you dim the lights, put down the phone, and let your room go dark, you're not just going to sleep. You're activating one of the oldest, most sophisticated survival systems your body has ever built. If this rewired the way you think about something as ordinary as turning off a light, that's exactly what we do here at Feynman Explore. We take the invisible mechanics running underneath your everyday life and make them visible, one hidden system at a time. If you want more of your biology explained like this clearly, deeply, and without the fluff, hit subscribe, because the next hidden system we uncover might be running inside you right now.